Thanks for joining us today. My name's Sean Hayden. I'm Head of Strategic Programs Innovation at Lancaster West. This is the Sustainability Series by Lancaster West. We have a talk today from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and Josh Newton has joined us to discuss the circular economy. Just a bit of housekeeping before we move on. We are recording today's session, and hopefully we'll be able to post that on our app website as well as our YouTube channel. If you could keep your cameras off, that would be great. Any questions that you have, be brilliant for you to keep them towards the end of the session. Just to give you a brief overview of an agenda for today, so a bit of an introduction by me, and then I'm going to hand over to Josh, who's going to do a bit of a presentation for about 20 minutes or so. And then there'll be a chance for us to break out for about 15 minutes to discuss some of the issues that are presented by Josh and do a bit of a sort of brainstorming and workshoppy exercise. And then we'll come back together, and then there's a Q&A at the end just to grill Josh. So yeah, circular economy, it's a term that you may have come across before, you may not have. It's a fairly new concept. It's really about how we kind of take information and products and services and move from a kind of linear economy to a more circular economy. Probably best that I hand over to Josh now to explain more. He's going to give you a good presentation on the basics and the understanding of what circular economy is. Hand over to yourself, Josh.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, I was getting worried you were going to start doing my presentation for me. So hopefully everyone can see this. Oh. Can you see the slide deck?
Not yet.
Sorry, 2 secs.
It's okay.
I'm not sure what's just happened there.
Here we go.
Well, anyway, sorry about that. It minimized somewhere. Lovely to meet you all. Thanks so much for having me today. My name's Josh, and I am a Cities Activation Manager at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. We're a network of over 2,000 organisations, businesses, charities, institutions, governments, and city actors and communities like yourself. Our role is to accelerate and advance the idea of the circular economy, which we'll come on to shortly, hopefully, if this loads. But yeah, my specific role is to help seed and support new circular economy policies and activities in cities around the world. And one of my main focuses is here in London, where I work really closely with the GLA and Re-London. So yeah, over the next kind of, I guess, 40 minutes, we'll be exploring these few points. I'll talk you through what the circular economy is and why it's important. I'll share some examples of what other cities and local communities do to support the circular economy. And then finally, we'll think about what Lancaster West can do to support the transition. So because we have a chat, I thought what would be good is if I ask a couple of questions and people can maybe pop in the chat their suggested answer to a couple of questions to help set the scene. So the first question is, what percentage of its life is a car used for driving? And I don't think I can see the chat, so someone might have to tell me when people put some ideas in the chat.
Yep, happy to do that, Josh. 8% so far. I'm going to say 52%.
52%. Okay, so it was
25, 8. They're all coming in now.
So it's 8%. So for 92% of a car's life, it's sat stationary, either outside your house or in a car park, and is not being used. So I guess the point here is to think about if we can make more of the use of a car and recognize that all the space it's taking up when it's not being used could be space that could be used for something else. And equally, if we only need cars 8% of the time, then could we not reduce the number of cars we have on our roads by at least 10 times? The second question is how many minutes is the average power drill used for in its lifetime? Use the chat again, if you'd like.
223.
223.
65 coming through here. 65 again.
Spoiler. So it's 18 minutes. So the average power drill is only used for 18 minutes before it's thrown away. So when you think that you go to B&Q, some people spend hundreds of pounds on a drill for them to use it to drill a couple of holes in their wall and to then let it sit there idle at home. It's not really an efficient use of resources. You could have just borrowed one for much cheaper. And it's a waste of, I guess, precious metals and things like that. So yeah, just another example. And then the final question. So what percentage of electronic and electrical equipment taken to UK tips could actually be resold or viably repaired and resold? In the chat.
50%.
50% coming in here. 50 again. 50 again. Everyone's going for 50 in the chats.
Well, it's only 23%. So a quarter of all electrical items that get thrown away could actually be resold. So when you think about that, the waste managers or councils pay for things to be thrown away and put in the tip, rather than if you could have found a marketplace to resell that phone or that laptop and made money yourself, or you could have donated it to be reused by someone less fortunate. And I guess the other point is that although 23% could have been repaired or resold, 100% of the stuff that does get thrown away has, again, valuable metals and things that we need to take out the ground in conflict zone countries, and they have to be transported here. So could we not have kind of got those valuable metals back and put them back into the economy? So they're just three questions to get you thinking. But where I like to start when we talk about the circular economy and to introduce you to it, we talk about what it isn't. And I think those three questions are an example of what it isn't. So we currently live in a take, make, waste linear society where we traditionally take things out the ground, whether that's wood or metals. We make stuff with those components, and then after a relatively short life, through long global supply chains, we then throw all these products away and they quickly become waste. This can be traced back to the Industrial Revolution, when we developed things to make, we developed techniques to make things a lot quicker and faster and far more cheaply than ever before. And I think it's driven, obviously, lots of economic growth. It's made cities like London the places they are, and it's provided incredible access to an incredible range of products and lifted millions out of poverty around the world. But at the same time, millions remain in poverty, and it's placed huge pressures on our planetary boundaries. So in our cities around the world, for example, our cities create around 85% of global GDP, but they consume about 75% of resources, and are therefore responsible for about 85% of emissions. And examples of cars and drills and electrical equipment we throw away is all resource we could actually recover. So we put forward this vision for a different kind of system, a system where, based on three principles, where we eliminate waste. I think firstly, actually, before I go into the principles, I just emphasize that they're all driven by design. And so that's recognizing that we make things and design things out through choices made at design stage. And all of the implications of the things we make and sell and throw away are all choices that we all make. They're not unhappy accidents, but consequences of decisions taken at the design stage. So the first principle is about eliminating waste and pollution. The second is about keeping materials in use for as long as possible and at their highest value. That's about promoting longer use of things, reuse, sharing, repairing, and as a last resort, recycling. And the third principle that we base the circular economy on is around how we apply lessons from nature, where waste as a concept doesn't actually exist. How can we ensure harmful chemicals and toxins and emissions don't return as poison to our planet, but instead as food for our planet? And the key message I want you to take away today is that the circular economy is a bigger idea. It's not just about recycling or managing waste. It's about creating a better system and a better economy that's more inclusive and resilient. And I think one of the most important, I guess, benefits is around its role in climate change. So obviously we all need to get to net zero, and people often talk about how we can do that through changing our energy system, so going from coal and oil to renewable energy. We released a report in 2019 that highlighted that you can't get to net zero through those decarbonisation strategies alone. We need to think about how we use our land, how we get things out of it, and how we grow things on it. And we recognise that 45% of emissions around the world currently can be attributed to the products we make and food we eat. And we could halve that by taking actions in food and plastics and the built environment. So going back to these three principles, I think just to help you kind of visualize what we mean by these, I'll give you three examples that we can then kind of take forward in the discussion. So the first example is Toast Ale. Now this is a company that was set up is a London-based company, and they use waste bread and put that into the brewing process. So over 30% of food around the world is wasted. That's 30%? 44% of all bread is wasted. And this is a loss of value of otherwise what could be eaten. That creates negative externalities. I think if food waste was a country, it would be the third largest emitting country in the world for greenhouse gases. So what Toast Ale do by replacing a third of malted grains, which are an original, I guess, a crop that you grow, by using a waste discarded bread instead, Toast Ale are helping make a dent in those emissions, as well as creating meaningful employment. And the other thing I like about Toast Ale is that it gives all its profits to charity as well. So from beer, we move to clothes, and this is Patagonia, who are, I guess, one of the fastest growing sportswear brands in the world. They kind of embody our second principle around keeping materials in use for longer. So unlike fast fashion, Patagonia designs their clothing for durability, so it lasts longer. So you don't need to buy as many items of clothing. They publish repair guides and run repair workshops, and they take back broken garments and bags, they fix them, and they will send you them back. So you as customers and consumers don't need to buy more than you need, and it reduces the amount of, I guess, garments that are in the system already. So the third principle is around regenerating natural systems. And this is one of my favorite examples. This is Venlo City Hall, which is a council building in a small town called Venlo in the Netherlands. And they tried to kind of embody, when they built the building, embody kind of the health and the environment in mind. So they created green facades which absorb NOx emissions and has improved local air quality demonstrably in a 500-meter radius around the building. And they also designed the building for disassembly. So every single component can be removed and then sold on. And so the building itself has value. And it meant that when they'll be able to recoup some of the original investment they put into the building if they were to disassemble it. And they've also, they secured bank loans through this exit. They secured bank loans by valuing the building and the components involved in it. So if they couldn't pay, they could use some of the components, but they didn't need to. So yeah, what these examples show, these three examples, Toast is a small business and it's in food. Patagonia is a big brand, a global brand that's textiles, and Venlo City Hall is a council-owned building, is obviously the built environment. So these three examples kind of illustrate that this is a cross-cutting agenda for local businesses, for large businesses, for the public, civil society, covering all the different areas, food, fashion, the built environment. And it represents, at least in Europe alone, a huge innovation challenge. There was a report a few years ago illustrating that it could create a 1.8 trillion euro opportunity for businesses to make money. And that's a source of growth and innovation in your local community. We've also kind of recognized the whole wealth of other community benefits that that the circular economy can apply, and why communities and cities need to be at the heart of our vision for a circular economy to create a more thriving and livable and resilient place. It has the potential to drive economic growth. You can reduce spending by spending less money on contracts or spend over the longer term. You can create jobs by recognizing that these are wasted resources, and if you can identify them as resources rather than waste, you can create jobs around them. If you use it as a framework, you can also help foster stronger communities, safer communities, use it for reducing emissions and improving just general community prosperity. So that, I guess, is the overview of what the circular economy is and its benefits, and how it's not a means to an end, but is a framework that you can, I guess, apply to lots of different things. And so now what I'll kind of do with the rest of my time is talk through some of the levers that we've developed at the foundation, that cities and, I guess, community groups and community actors can pull to help shape change and drive the circular economy forward. So the first example is setting a vision. So I guess one of the things that we find when we talk to our network of cities is they set a roadmap or a route map for the circular economy. In London, that's led by Re-London, which was called LWAB, but is now Re-London, and is the kind of executive office for waste in the London area. Amsterdam and Glasgow are other cities that have kind of adopted a circular economy route map. But you could also think about how a city or a local authority could embed the circular economy in other route maps and strategies. So you could build it into business planning, into community wealth building. If you have a food strategy, how can you think about circular economy in that sense? Social prescribing, transport, public health. I mean, probably the most obvious is also your net zero or climate emergency plan if you've declared a climate emergency. And there are lots of opportunities with how you can embed the circular economy as a framework into all of those different strategies. The next lever to pull is about engage. I should say that all these different levers, no one individual one is a silver bullet, but they're all, I guess, the different levers that you should pull together inside a policy mix or a package of measures to support a community. So alongside setting a vision, which helps set the tone and identify all the opportunities in a systematic way, you can engage. So one of the best examples that the foundation was involved in a few years ago was our Where Next campaign in New York, where we brought together all the leading retailers in New York to promote the idea that New Yorkers could drop off clothes. I think previously only 1% of clothes that were sold in New York were resold, and the rest, I think 3/4 of clothing ended up in landfill. And so this kind of awareness raising campaign on billboards and on bus shelters helped promote the New Yorkers to not throw their clothes away and put them elsewhere. And so obviously that has tangible benefits for cities that are having to pay for landfill costs, and it also helps keep those clothes in the loop. They can either be sold on for your profit or given to charity and support those that are vulnerable. And so there's always uses for these things if you think about it. And that's just simply an awareness raising exercise. The other example is the Remakery in Brixton, near where I live. It was an old refurbished garage in an estate called Paulette Estate, and they converted it to become this kind of creative workspace, which provides a space for craftspeople that don't have too much space, a coffee shop and all that. But they also put on courses that are affordable and very low price. They've done lots of evening courses for free, I think, that help people learn basic skills in repair. So they know how to mend their own jeans, or they know how to change plugs. And it's recognizing that by doing these small upskilling and capacity building training programs for people, you rely less on having to go to Argos to buy a new toaster. You just know how to fix a fuse yourself. So along from engaged to urban management, this is about recognizing that cities can play a really powerful role with the physical and financial assets that you have. You can help show local demand, and you can support circular economy business models and activities. So I think one of my favorite examples is that of the Austin Materials Marketplace. Businesses, so traders and developers and builders, they obviously always have surplus material when they go to a project. They have old windows, or they have additional bits of timber. Previously, that would all have to go to landfill. But what Austin, the local government did, they set up this online marketplace where all the manufacturers around the city could share what surplus resources they have, sell them for a cut price. And Austin also created, I guess, a physical place where you could deposit these and treat them almost as a bank, where people could go rather than having to go to B&Q or a trade site. And I think it's not even been a decade, but they've managed to avoid something like 400 tons of material going to landfill, the equivalent of 950 million tons of CO2. It's absolutely astronomical what they've done, and I think, according to the EPA, I think it is the same amount of energy or emissions they've saved that would fuel 100 million homes in the US for a whole year. So from buildings to food, this is Milan, who, as part of their kind of well-regarded food strategy in the city, they use their public procurement to pay for universal free school meals, and they procured food for the schools from 100 farms surrounding the city. So rather than developing complex often global supply chains for food, they just worked with the farmers that live around the area. That meant that the city was able to create associated savings from not having to transport food so far. They were able to work with the farmers to develop healthier produce, and that could also regenerate the soil, and also create healthier meals. It helped address poverty as well through the free school meals element. And also, crucially, it created local jobs. And the city was then dependent on these farmers in creating a far more resilient system locally than relying on complex, longer supply chains. The final few are kind of often harder to visualize, and sometimes it's difficult for local communities to do these things. But you can always regulate. And often, I guess this example here of New York, where they banned foam containers that were not recyclable, that was, I guess, a mandatory ban. But I think that communities and neighborhoods could also think about how they could enforce voluntary regulations and voluntary bans. How could you work with a whole street, I guess, from thinking about the other levers to firstly raise awareness of the big materials that are getting thrown away, but then work with the whole street of cafes or whatever to just all work together to buy the same, develop a take back scheme or fully recyclable packaging. And that means there's less reliance on mandatory banning, but it's an opportunity where everyone can work together on it. And yeah, so that's it, I guess, in a nutshell, sharing all the different ways that you can apply the circular economy. All I would say, I mean, maybe we could take some questions now, or we can do the breakout, but we have lots of resources on the foundation website. specifically for cities, but around lots of different other topics: design, food, fashion, textiles, plastics. So you can visit the website and have a look at those. Thanks.
Brilliant, Josh. Thanks for that. It was awesome introduction to circular economy. Yeah, is it worth doing some questions now if anyone has any, and then we can break out to those breakout rooms. Just for everyone's knowledge, we're going to move on to a breakout session. Josh has devised a bit of a session for us to kind of talk through some of the issues that we've kind of learned about in that presentation. But is it worth just taking some questions now, Josh? If there are any. Does anyone have any questions at all they want to fire at Josh? Silence. No.
I've got a sort of a question.
Good, Aubrey.
Aubrey. And that is that we're doing a lot of refurbishment projects. And is there somewhere we can go to look at what sort of components we can use which are fully recyclable in a refurbishment project?
For refurbishment projects, I think there's lots of examples online. I think if you search for circular economy with, I guess, things like retrofit or whatever, there are lots of examples. We have a case study bank of examples that cover across the built environment and the kind of things you do. We also have recently published an upstream innovation guide with 100 different solutions to kind of around packaging and plastic, which I guess is not retrofitting, but there are lots of solutions out there, and often it's about embedding them in procurement or tenders, or just actually recognizing what the challenges are and sharing them, and they can become sources of innovation with, I guess, the traders you're working with. I can share the website, yeah, as well.
Cool. Any other questions from anyone else at all? Cool. I think we're about to break out, aren't we, Alice? Alice, have you organised the rooms for us at all?
Yes, we've got 3 breakout rooms, and I'll say we'll break out for 15 minutes to come back at 3:45.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
cool.
I'll start breakout rooms now.
Great. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, we're back in the main room. Cool.
That was abrupt.
Hello. That was abrupt.
Sorry.
We'll just came flying back into the.
I hope everyone's ended up in the right place.
Yeah. So that was how was that for everyone? How was that for you, Josh? We had some really good discussion on our sort of group around all of the things. I don't know. Do you want to feedback now, or is it worth just doing an overarching Q&A on some of the things?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to combine the two.
Yeah, should we combine the two?
Yeah, I think looking at breakout, our group was really great. It was helpful. We talked about some of the things that local organisations do. A lot of it seems very informal, but as well as there's proper systems in place. I think a couple of people referenced that, like Portobello Road is just full of secondhand shops. That's exactly the circular economy. There's work that the council are doing to support food waste collection, which is helping collect organic waste and turn that into something useful rather than it going into landfill. And there are more informal examples, I think, parent associations reselling school uniform, which I thought is a nice example. It shows the way that communities can improve access. Like once you've been to school, you don't need the uniform, and you can make it more accessible for other families in the area. So that was cool.
Yeah, so my group, really good conversation again. A lot of ideas coming through. We talked about things like furniture restoration, places called Groundwork, which is also furniture restoration, charity shops, enviro builds, zero waste hubs, oleo, reduces food waste. So yeah, a lot of conversation around sort of what's going on at the moment, really. So yeah, really good stuff. What you had, Alice, your group?
Yeah, I think most of our ideas were put on the same board as you, to be honest. I'm a bit confused with what we came up with. We didn't have too much of a discussion, but the ideas that were coming through, it was stuff like apps. So Too Good To Go in the Olio app, which is where local restaurants basically upload if they've got any food at the end of the day that they haven't sold, they can sell it in like a little package for cheaper to ensure there isn't as much food waste, which obviously links to the fact that 30% of waste is food, as Josh said earlier, which I didn't realise it was that big. Yeah, stuff about like heartbeat sales and charity shops and things like that. And when we spoke about how we can actually take these ideas forward, it was all to do with basically involving everyone. So it's the whole bottom-up approach, the community engagement, education side of things, enabling people to apply circular economy to their lives and community rather than telling people to, was the main idea.
I think we had some really good conversation around what could be done on the estate in terms of the Lancaster West refurbishment, which is sort of the main reason for the neighbour team, basically. And there's a lot of thought going on at the moment around how we might reuse some of the materials, how we might create a digital strategy and use BIM to kind of record the material flows, to understand the contracts that we have in place, move them from to a service contract rather than a kind of existing traditional contracts. And sort of really understanding kind of the materials that are going in, what's being used, and making sure that we can kind of reuse and recycle as kind of from an asset management perspective. Cool. Is there anything else from yourself, Josh? No. Cool.
No, we didn't even get to taking some ideas forward. I think we're starting to talk about just some of the features that a circular neighbourhood would include, but I think a lot of the ones you've already covered.
Brilliant. Cool. Well, really appreciate your time today, Josh. Been an amazing sort of experience. I've learned a lot. I hope everyone else has. Appreciate all you guys for coming as well. Good exercise and a really good presentation. And we'll be around next month as well. We'll be looking at renewable heat networks next month, hopefully. So we'll send you some information around that next sustainability series. But appreciate your time today, guys, and all the best for the future. See you later. Take it easy. Bye bye now. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.